Yeah, it hurts in my elbow, but when I touch there, my pinky tingles, and if I stretch there, my neck feels really hot. What's going on? There's a chance you injured 3 separate parts of your body simultaneously, but there might be a more likely explanation. Nerve flossing, nerve glides, nerve tension drills, neurodynamics. There are a lot of names out there regarding these nerve mobilizations. There is also a lot of misinformation. Understanding these nerve mobilizations is an incredible tool for your own prehab and rehab process. Because they're a little complex, I'm going to organize these videos in the following way. There will be a little bit of general information so you understand what you're doing. Then I'll go over the mobilization itself. Then at the end, there's going to be a more intense physiology section going over the how and the why. I really encourage you to watch the whole video so you can understand what's happening. One of the things you need to understand before we jump in is that a nerve can be mobilized in 2 locations, peripherally or down the limb, and centrally or at the neck or back, depending on where we're working. The other thing you need to understand is that nerves do not respond well to being stretched. If you apply too much pressure, the nerve is likely to become more symptomatic. And this is the primary problem I have with many of the videos out there regarding nerve glides. Most of them are not showing you a glide, they're showing you a stretch. There is a time and a place for nerve stretching, but it's often much later in the rehab process. The ulnar nerve. Most people with irritation to the ulnar nerve are going to feel it either here at the elbow or along the ring and pinky finger in your hand. For every nerve glide, we need to understand the path that the nerve takes running down the limb in order to determine how to treat it. The ulnar nerve leaves the neck and joins a big bundle of nerves going into our arm called our brachial plexus. It runs in the bottom side of the armpit, then it goes around the back side of the elbow, right at your funny bone, then switches around, travels into the forearm, passing into the hand, on the pinky side of the wrist, and eventually going into the pinky and the ring finger. So, bottom side of the armpit, back side of the elbow, front side of the wrist. In order to elongate that nerve in the limb, we need to bend at every one of those joints. The motion that tends to be used for this looks like this. Fascinating. So that's the peripheral component. The central component is a lot easier. It's simply taking the head and neck and bending away from the limb that we're working on or towards. As I bend away, I'm elongating the nerve right at the nerve roots. And as I bend towards, I'm obviously shortening things. Now we combine these concepts into a true glide, which involves elongating on one side and shortening on the other. As I bring my arm up like this, I bring my head and neck towards that same side. Now I undo the motion, shortening peripherally and stretching centrally. And I go back and forth. Make sure you're only going shy of your symptoms. You really don't want to feel anything at all as you do these. You may not have access to this full range of motion depending on your level of sensitivity, and that's fine. You may look like this, and that's where you start, but over time, you try and go a little bit deeper into the motion. Now, after you've done this for a little while, your symptoms are settling down day to day, and you want to increase the challenge, then you can turn this into a stretch, and there's 2 phases of this. The first phase involves keeping the head in the center and working through this range. The most aggressive version of this involves tensioning the system at both ends simultaneously. That would look like this. Shortening simultaneously, tensioning simultaneously. This is stretching the nerve at both ends throughout the motion. As far as sets and reps go for this, you really need to feel into it yourself. Start with 5 to 10 repetitions, making sure you have a handle on how to do this without any symptom provocation. Then stop and see how you feel the rest of the day. I know it sounds like I'm being overly cautious, but these exercises really can irritate things that much. Once you have a handle on this mobilization, you can do as many as 30 or 40 or more of these at one time. Because remember, you shouldn't be feeling any symptoms at all, so it shouldn't be provocative. Try 1 set per day and build up to a few throughout your day if you're seeing progress. Under good conditions, the nerves in our body exist right alongside the muscles, tendons, arteries, and other structures that are in our body. As we move around, those structures glide past each other without getting stuck. But if due to injury or bad biomechanics, a nerve is being held in place by pressure or scar tissue or any number of other things, a new anchor point is now in the system. Look at this elastic band. It's like the nerves that run down our arms. Normally, they're only anchored at the beginning and the end of the system. And as we move our arm around, the tension that is introduced as it bends over different joints is distributed along the entire length of that elastic band. But if we've introduced a new anchor point into the system, as we move that limb around, all that tension that used to be distributed across the whole length is now only getting distributed across this much smaller piece, drastically increasing the overall tension in that part of the system. So what does increased strain do to a nerve? Like a finger trap toy, when the ends are pulled apart from each other, the middle portion is squeezed together. This increases the pressure inside the structure. Because we're dealing with a nerve, which is a cell, that increased pressure can disrupt normal functioning of the nerve. One of the main ways to know if this is what you're dealing with is to recognize that these symptoms are likely to only be on one side at a time. It is possible that you could have these symptoms on both sides simultaneously, it's just a lot more rare. Really, whenever we're dealing with nerve-related injuries, I recommend you get it checked out. Treating nerves can be tricky, and while it's fine to start with a video like this to get yourself going, there are a lot of specific diagnostic tests that a physical therapist or other practitioners can use to really dial in what needs to happen for you specifically. Don't try and diagnose yourself from a video, please. Please. I hope you found this helpful. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Boom, 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 boom.